In this video, I wanted to show you the two tax forms that you need to fill out when you start a new job. The first of the two forms is this one, the Form W-4. The reason I want to show you these forms is that at first glance, they can look pretty intimidating. There is a lot written on them. There's a lot to see, and it definitely looks overwhelming, especially if you're not familiar with filling out these kinds of documents. And it's important that you know these forms are very misleading. They look like there's all this confusing stuff to fill out that you could never possibly understand, when in reality, what you need to fill out, especially as a high school student or a recent graduate who is probably applying for an entry-level position, the amount of information that you need to fill out is pretty minimal. So the majority of you won't need to worry about most of this part. This part becomes important once you have what we call legal dependents or other deductions. And these would be reasons why the government shouldn't take as much from you in taxes, because when the time comes, you won't owe as much. However, if you are currently a dependent yourself, meaning that you're under 18 or you're still a student and you live full-time with your parents or guardians who claim you as a dependent on their own taxes, you are actually exempt from paying taxes, which means that you get a full refund when the tax returns come at the end of the year. All of this information about dependents really doesn't have anything to do with you or any of these exemptions or deductions. So the only part you're concerned with is this part at the bottom. And all of this information is probably personal information that you can very easily fill out on your own. It's asking for your name, address, marital status, and social security number. This one you may not have memorized, but you probably have a copy of your social security card, and if you don't, certainly your parent or guardian should be able to help you find your social security number. This part, total allowances from line H, that refers back to this section, which we already said very likely does not apply to you as a student or a minor. So these here you can skip. Now, if you would like to, as I said, if you're currently a dependent yourself, you are probably tax exempt, and you could write exempt here, which means they would not take any taxes out of your paycheck when you get paid each pay period, and you would get your full amount. If you do not write exempt, they will take the taxes out, but then you would be entitled to a full refund when you file your tax return, typically around February or March. Then you just sign the form. And so even though this had so much information on it and looks so confusing, actually, when you go to fill it out, it only asks for the same typical personal information that you use on any other types of forms, documents, signups, registrations, anything like that. This is the back of the W-4. It's additional worksheet space that relates to these same deductions and allowances. You can actually ignore the entire back of this sheet at this point. When you get older, when you have dependents, spouse, children, other reasons why you should be able to deduct from your taxes or allowances that should be made for what's taken out, you may be more concerned with these other parts of the form, but for now, it's not really relevant to you. So this is the other form. This one is called an I-9, and this one is quite long. It's 4 or 5 pages that they give you all stapled together. And if you thought that the W-4 looked confusing, I'm sure that the I-9 is really a lot to process. However, just like with the W-4, the majority of the I-9 is there to explain how to fill the form out and explain the significance of the form. So most of the 5 pages here can be ignored. Really, the only important part to you is the very first page. This is the part that actually gets filled out. So the Form I-9, the purpose of it is to show that you have legal status to work in the United States. And by being born as a citizen, the majority of you would already be eligible simply through birth. And you see that this here, a citizen of the United States, this is what's going to apply to most of you. Now, if you were not born as a U.S. citizen, but you have some other type of documentation that allows you to work even though you are not a natural citizen, then you would fall into one of these other categories, and you would know what that is if you do. So we're going to stick with the citizens of the U.S. who have Social Security numbers, because that's going to be the majority of you. If your situation is different and you don't know for sure what you should check off, you can ask me personally or ask your parent or guardian, and we'll be able to figure that out for you. But again, really all you're filling out here is your name, address, birthday, Social Security number, and then again, here you're going to check off this box if you were born in the U.S. as a citizen. You sign and date. And the rest of this actually is not for you to fill out. It's all for a representative of your employer to fill out. And this is the part where you have to actually show your resident status or your eligibility for work. And that's what these parts refer to. So on another page here of the I-9, you'll see where it says list of acceptable documents. And so the I-9, as a form to verify your eligibility for employment, is going to be submitted to the government. And when the employer's representative fills it out, you have to show that person your documentation of eligibility. That person then completes the form. And by doing that, they are basically telling the government, yes, I have seen this documentation. Yes, this person is legally eligible to work. You would need to have from this list either one item from list A, and if you have one thing on this list, it's good enough to cover your documentation all by itself. If you don't have anything from this list, and the most common one that anybody might have would be a passport. So if you don't have a passport, then you need something from this list and something from this list. So essentially, when you go to finalize the paperwork when you're hired for a new job, you will fill out that Form W-4 that we looked at first, and that's this one. And again, this one determines what are you entitled to claim as allowances or exemptions to determine how much should or shouldn't be taken from you in taxes, how much are you going to be responsible to pay. This does not determine your actual tax bill. This is just to help your employer estimate how much money should be sent to the government on your behalf. And then later, it's the government that decides how much you actually owe. And then they will either give you some money back if your employer sent more than you owed, or you will owe taxes and you'll have to pay in a little more. But the majority of you at this stage would be getting full refund or at least a partial one. So back to our list of acceptable documents. Again, if you have something from list A, for most of you, it's probably a passport if you have anything at all. And so you would fill out your I-9 with your personal information, bring your passport. They would take a photocopy of it to put with your documents, and you would be all set. If you don't have a passport, you would need either a driver's license, or you may have a state ID card or some other ID card. Your school ID with your picture on it would actually fulfill this as well. If this is what you're using, driver's license, school ID, something from this list, then you will also need something from this list. So your social security card or your birth certificate, but it needs to be an original birth certificate or a certified copy. It cannot be a photocopy that you've made. And then we see there's some other options here. So essentially, when you go to fill out your paperwork, you're going to do the W-4, the I-9. It's just your personal information, name, address, social security number, birth date, signature, and then you'll need to provide them with either your passport or a photo ID and your social security card or birth certificate. And those would be the most common documents that you would show to determine your employment eligibility in the United States. So even though this paperwork looks long and confusing, lots to read, lots to look at, lots included here, and all looks very official and legal and intimidating, frankly. Hopefully this helps you to see that when you pare it down to the basics, it's really a very minimal amount that you actually have to fill in, and really is mostly all information that you have easy access to and know off the top of your head and could fill out very simply. Good luck.